All right, before we get into the series that are still going on, let's, I guess, say goodbye to the Brooklyn Nets / give props to the Boston Celtics for absolutely dominating in a 4-0 series win. I can't say enough about what Boston's defense was able to do in this series. The way that they flustered Kevin Durant was incredible. The physicality off the ball, timely switches, physical switches, the way that they showed help, the way that they sent doubles at random times. Kevin Durant could never really find the rhythm. And I just think this is where the conversation should start when it comes to that series. Giving Boston props for what they were able to do to take Brooklyn out of their element.
Well, the conversation should start with the massive apology to Ime Udoka. Let's
Also
make that
true.
let's make that massively clear. It's been very quiet as opposed to what the conversation was earlier. I think Boston went out and took this series. To
Mm-hmm.
your credit and to what you said, they went out and took this. The Nets could never really find the pressure points they needed to hit. And Boston's defense did such an incredible job of making what Kevin Durant and Kyrie do as difficult as they could. Because this Brooklyn run was based on those two. Fair or unfair, it was based on those two making enough plays in the playoffs where bucket getting is at a premium. They are the type of guys who can take your game plan, throw it over the top rope. And Boston fought and did whatever they could. Like not just being physical, but also mixing up their coverages and also still showing help. You know, hey, you want to go off ball actions to these guys? Cool, we're going to switch it. We're going to muck that up. Now you're up against the clock. You want to go pick and roll? We'll switch. Maybe we'll trap. You never know. You want to go ISO? We're sending help from everywhere. If you beat us, there's more help behind that. So
Mm-hmm.
as far as checking the boxes to take away things that we let those guys get in a rhythm, because with star players, there's usually always one thing they can get to. You took away A, B, I got C in my back pocket. And now that I got C going, I can get back to A and B. They never really let those guys get in that flow. And with KD, it gets all the shine because of what they did. But I thought they did a heck of a job on Kyrie as well, as far as saying, hey, you are going to have to continue to hit these shots. And we're taking away these drives. But we got to talk about Boston's offense. The big thing for me, Jason Tatum being able to take his scoring ability and convert that into opportunities for others was huge this series. Huge. And that's something Boston's been waiting on for a long time, to where they could see they were trying to get there, but other teams weren't cooperating. Maybe it was the matchup of this series where his size created such a mismatch or such an advantage that Boston could just do what they wanted. But they did it over and over again. So when it was winning time, it was time to get Tatum the ball. They could use Brown and Tatum together, something that we've talked about numerous times as far as that being a switch. Couldn't be a switch this series, or at least couldn't be a switch that you liked.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Tatum could just be a screener. You know, Patty Mills on the floor, let's screen. I'm either going to hold you and roll, or I'm going to get the switch, and now you got to double and help, and I'm going to make those plays for other people. They never really felt like they never really had the lineup to where they had everyone on the floor as someone who they felt comfortable guarding Tatum, and you add his ability to score, and now he's creating. That's a tough blend. And credit to Boston's guys for making the shots they had to. I talked about Grant Williams all season long about his percentages and perhaps that not changing the perception of how teams guarded him. He made Brooklyn pay.
Mm-hmm. All series long.
Al Horford, generally in the playoffs, you're looking at him saying, why didn't you just shoot that? Wasn't a lot of those moments in this series. Peyton Pritchard contributed. Marcus Smart felt like he had a game ender in almost every game. Jaylen Brown just did his job. It's good stuff. Now, don't want to look ahead too far, but I am intrigued to see if Boston can do this against another team. Let's use Milwaukee, for example. I can go too deep, but you had significant advantages offensively because of your size. You may not have those same ones in the next series. How do you adjust there? because they found a template that works in the regular season and should work in the playoffs. And now they've shown once they find something in the playoffs, we can go ahead and hurt you there and defend at an elite level. What do you do if maybe that's taken away? Because every series is different.
It's kind of what I'm keen to know. I think as you talked about Boston's offense, like that's where I'm really intrigued with a potential Boston-Milwaukee series, because Milwaukee does have the size. They are going to be able to shrink the floor to a degree that Brooklyn simply could not. I'm curious to see like if those others can continue to come through. Like, what is Marcus Smart going to look like from 3-point line? How many threes will Grant Williams make? What is Derek White going to look like? I think that's going to become more important because you're going to have Brook, you're going to have Giannis on the floor roaming around. I don't think you're going to be able to control the paint in the way that they were in this Brooklyn series. And so I'm just intrigued to see what the movement's going to look like, what the shooting is going to look like. We will dig deeper into a potential Boston series whenever we get that result. Milwaukee is up 3-1 right now. Can kind of guess where that's going to go, but we'll save it for later in the week. On the Brooklyn side, I guess what's the top thing you think they should address heading into the offseason? Is it just size in general, or where do you go if you're Brooklyn?
Get some more size, get some more versatility, make sure you have some shooting. I think you have a template. You have two really good players. Now you just need to fill out the roster with the right kind of pieces around them. You need to make sure you have those 3-and-D type guys to where you can now feel comfortable playing a big, playing those two, playing Bruce Brown and X. So you have the shooting and the playmaking guard-wise in that guard room between Patty Mills, Goran Dragic, Seth Curry. The problem was they're all the same size. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a problem in the playoffs. When now we can just attack the matchups, put pressure on you, and see where it goes. I thought they took strides as far as fighting defensively. I think offensively, I think the execution slipped for me as far as the pressure points. But at the same time, you missed Joe Harris. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like they could ever get to those actions or sets that really consistently put pressure on teams and make them make decisions. If Joe Harris is out there, can they manipulate the spacing in a little bit better fashion, lineup wise? Does the small lineup have a little bit more punch? Those kind of things. So I think for me, it's just making sure you're balanced. You get your wing room right. You got the bigs you want that fit what you're trying to do, and you have versatility with your bigs to where, hey, we can play a drop, we can play at the level, we could switch. Because it felt like not having a switch big, and that's no disrespect to Nick Claxton. It just, Tatum wasn't the best matchup for him, but not having a switch big hurt them. You saw what happened when Blake came in as far as being able to stretch the floor, but on the other end, it opened some things up. So they just need to make sure they have enough things in their bag to get through it. But this was a weird year as far as the injuries went. Obviously, they didn't have Kyrie for most of the year. Traded James Harden in the middle of the year. So it's more so figure out how to build around your two and have enough depth, enough scoring, enough shooting, enough defense to be able to shuffle the deck.
I got you. I guess to answer my own question, like I think it starts with the wing room for me. And I think a lot of that can be solved internally. Like next year, if they're healthy, you get Joe Harris back, you get Ben Simmons, you get another year of Kessler Edwards. Like that's 3 already that you can kind of shuffle in the 3-4 spot. Add another guy, and then I'm curious to see what they do at the front court. They don't have bird rights on Andre Drummond. He already alluded to the fact like, hey, I might not be here next year. We'll see. And Nick Claxton is a restricted free agent. So I would assume Brooklyn wants to bring him back, but he was also in trade rumors right after the Harden deal was made. So we'll just have to see what the front court is going to look like heading into next season. But I think that was the biggest thing that stood out in the series from their side, like just the lack of size. I mean, you touched on most of it, so I'm not going to rehash all of it, but going to a bunch of 3-guard lineups against this Boston team just did not put them in a good spot defensively. So they're going to have to address that heading into the year. Before we move off of this series, though, I just want to say, I was very annoyed, very frustrated with the Ben Simmons discourse towards the tail end of this series. I don't like the questioning of injuries. I don't like the questioning of mental health. And I feel like a lot of the conversation around it was gross. And a lot of the things that were pushed, especially on national airwaves, rubbed me the wrong way. And I think we need to be a lot better about how we talk about situations like that. I'll just leave it there. I don't want to turn this into a 15-minute big mad segment, but I didn't like where that went.
Man, there's too much good stuff happening in the game of basketball to be recycling talking points right now at this point in the season. Why are we doing it? He's been out. He's probably going to stay out. Like, I don't know why it's a thing. The worst, he tried to come back and he couldn't. Why are we now going back and circling back to some of those talking points? Like, if he had played 2-minute stretches tonight, would any of this matter?
Then it'll be why didn't it happen earlier, or why didn't you do more?
Hey, let's talk basketball. 8 games this weekend, right?
A lot of hoop.
You could choose any one of them. Mad interesting things happen. Stan Van Gundy gave you a gift of a tweet this morning.
Yes, he did.
And y'all want to talk about Ben Simmons. I don't want to talk about Ben Simmons, which is why on this podcast, you know who we don't talk about? Ben Simmons. He hadn't played. Sorry.
There we go. All right, let's talk about the Stan Van Gundy thing real quick before we officially move off of the series since it's over with. Much was spoken about Steve Nash in the series and the way that Ime Udoka outcoached him, or Nash did or didn't make adjustments, whatever. Stan Van Gundy gets on the timeline and he says something to the effect of, just because you don't see what adjustments are being made by a coach does not mean that an adjustment isn't being made. And that tweet took off. There were the, yes, Stan, you're right comments. There was, why is Stan defending another coach? Why don't former coaches ever say anything bad about coaches? Yada, yada, yada. There was pushback on Nash making adjustments, period. So I guess for you, my question to you, I guess, is a two-parter. One, how did you feel about the Van Gundy take? And two, how did you feel about Nash's job in the series overall?
Well, I think Stan had time today. My issue with the whole out-coaching thing is, tell me the last coach that you've said out-coached someone but they lost. So we're just talking about winning, right? So what are we actually talking about? Like, I don't like adjustments being used as a blanket statement because it's literally just tied to the result. And there's mad adjustments you may make that just don't work or only work for a little bit. But there's a time period on adjustments, folks. And it doesn't, like, you can shuffle the deck as much as you want. In a playoff series, you know what the other team can do. The other team knows what they can do. And they're just working to get to that. So for Brooklyn in the series, for instance, they had to find a way to get enough defensively to hold up and then score on the other end. And you could say, well, Steve Nash didn't make any adjustments. A lot of times Bruce Brown was in that strong side corner. You can argue if that's the best idea or not, but he was put there because of the help that Al Horford was providing and trying to make him pay and hoping maybe they could loosen that up. Didn't necessarily work, but it was a thought. They moved KD to the middle of the floor, tried to go 1-4 flat. They tried to use him as a screener. Like, they tried things. Boston countered back. That's how the game works. You know? Like, it's not like it's adjustments to the adjustments. And this is why I try and point them out. For instance, let's just go random. Let's go Dallas-Utah series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dallas has been destroying Utah with drive, help from the corner, kick to the corner, make a three. Utah adjusts by saying, you know what? Drive, help, we're selling out on that corner pass. We get a steal, we get a contest. You know what Dallas did? Sweet. We're putting Reggie Bullock on that wing. So you can go ahead and rotate to that corner. Guess what's open now? Those are all adjustments. Like, they're all adjustments. Like, this is the playoffs. Both teams have positives and negatives. You are trying to protect your weaknesses that you know that you have and the other team knows that you have for as long as possible, while also trying to win the game. If the other team, the better team, ends up turning the corner and still finding a way to do what they do, it's a wrap. There's only so many adjustments you can make. There's only so many lineup changes you can make. There's only so many coverages you can throw out there. And each series is its own thing. We just talked about it with Boston and Brooklyn. What worked against Brooklyn may not work in the next round. That doesn't all of a sudden make Boston bad. It just is now a difficult and different series. And you're trying to respect your base of what got you here while figuring out how to survive and win in this round. And what you find may literally end up meaning nothing as soon as this round's over. If we win a series because we went zone, we win 2 or 3 games in a row, and we play a team we can't play zone against, well, we got to find something else. You know what I mean? Like going back to Dallas, Utah, Bogdanovich on Brunson. Great move, in my opinion. Thought it set a tone active. If Brunson figures it out or Dallas figures it out, is it that now a bad move? Was that a bad adjustment now?
Shouldn't be. Just means the adjustment got countered.
That's the playoffs. And when people talk about, hey, why don't coaches talk about other coaches? Because enough people talk about coaches.
This is what Stan said.
Why would they then join in on that party? But, you say anything, you're all of a sudden a cape wearer and a defender and all sorts of stuff. So it's fine.
The hashtag is big annoyed. I don't think it's big mad in this case, but
bit confused. Like, I never want to not let anyone have their criticisms or their thoughts. I think we should all be able to communicate those freely, but at least have a base with it. Like, even if you disagree with a decision, I'd like you to know what the decision was and why that may have worked, so we can get to more buts instead of that was trash.
Mm-hmm.
Because the same thing you're calling trash may work the next game. And now what are you going to say?
Got lucky.
If you're mad at the Sixers for trying to exploit Toronto doubling Joel Embiid just because they missed shots this game as opposed to making shots the other game, but then they make shots the next game, what's the difference?
It's a good adjustment.
I see. Just like, never mind. I almost went there. Anyways.
All right.
Side note, shout out to Blake Griffin for slandering the Memphis Grizzlies.
Do you want to talk about it or
no? Man should know better.
Oh, all right. Sheesh. Yeah, to your point, and I made this point on my timeline when the Stan tweet first dropped and stuff. Like, there's just so much that we don't know. And I say we, and I mean like people like me, not you, who've actually worked for organizations and stuff. Like, there's just a wealth of knowledge that the general public isn't privy to. And it takes a lot of studying and listening and reading to even begin your journey into understanding some of the stuff. And it's not that it's impossible to get there, I guess, in terms of a knowledge base, but like, it takes a lot of work. Like, I think it's important to acknowledge, hey, there are a lot of micro decisions that go into these things that I'm just not privy to. I just don't know. And I wish more people understood that, because it's always funny listening. And I was bad about this when I'm still in the midst of learning, obviously, but like, especially early on when I was getting deeper into this, like, I was very much a what is this coach doing thing. And I can look back on some of the criticisms that I've had, like especially with like Eric Spoelstra during the Big Three era. A lot of things that a lot of things that he did during that era. I'm just like, what is Spo doing? What is this? What is this? That I can look back on now. I'm like, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But like, all right, sure, it would appear that Eric Spoelstra knows more about basketball than I do. That's a shocking development, but cool. And I think if you come at it with that and you ask questions, which on a more personal note, I'm glad that I get to do this podcast with you in particular, knowing that I don't know a lot of stuff, I can just kind of draw on that knowledge sometimes. Like, hey, what are you seeing here? Why do you think this happened? I may still agree or disagree with what the coach did or didn't do or whatever, but at the very least, you have on many occasions on this podcast pointed out something or rationale behind the move where I'm just like, okay, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. May still disagree, but I wouldn't have thought about this way. So I just ask questions. And I think framing the conversation is, I'm not sure why Team X or Coach X did this versus Team X / Coach X isn't doing anything. Like, that's not the same thing. That's not entirely accurate. And that's where I think people like Stan are put in these positions to where they're defending Steve Nash, where it's not even really defending, it's just saying, no, actually, the point that you're making is wrong, and here's why.
And Stan said, someone told Stan, what adjustments has he made? He filled up a whole tweet with things he did.
It went through like 5 or 6 different adjustments. Just like, yeah, right, no adjustments. And the guy responds like, well, they're still getting outclassed. I'm just like, the plot has been missed. This is not how this is not how this is supposed to go. You have Stan Van Gundy on Twitter. You should be using that as a resource. Stan Van Gundy is tweeting on purpose, and you are trying to actually him instead of like, hey, can you peel the curtain back a little bit?
Like, that's the thing, though. There used to be a time where you would get the response, and now you ask more questions. And now it's just like, nah, but nah.
Like, that's just not how any of this is supposed to work.
Well, the thing is, though, the journey with basketball, it never really ends. You keep learning. The game keeps evolving. So, like, for me, I don't see myself as like the gospel or the truth or anything like that. I just know if I don't watch, I don't have an edge over anyone. I don't have the player resume. You know what I mean? Like, I have a resume, but it's not like Heat Spurs for 10 years or something like that. You know what I mean? So I have to, for me, go above and beyond to be able to enter a room and talk about basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has different eyes, and everyone's eyes develop in different ways. But once you start to watch the game a certain way, you start to understand things. And like, I miss stuff all the time, but you got to re-see it and rewatch it. And now you notice the trends, and now you see, oh, that's why that happened. That's why that worked. That's what they were trying to do. You know, ask yourself questions. It's the first thing I learned in the league. I had so many offensive ideas. I thought it was so great. You know what question stopped me every time? What's the ending? What do we do next? What if the ball's denied? How do we counter that? Well,
you do it better.
Yeah. That stuff is important, man. Anyways, basketball's fun. Let's have more fun with it.
It should. Like, it's a fun game. It's a beautiful game. Let's watch it, enjoy it, learn more about it instead of being combative all of the time.